Now let's move on to the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland is also part of an endocrine axis, so it starts up here in the hypothalamus. And what does the hypothalamus release that's going to stimulate the adrenal gland? CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone. That travels through the hypophyseal portal system, acts on the anterior pituitary, and what does the anterior pituitary release in response? ACTH, adrenocorticotropin hormone. ACTH travels throughout the blood. ACTH travels throughout the blood, and where does it act? Where does it bind to? The adrenal gland, but what part of the adrenal gland does it bind to? It binds to the adrenal cortex around the outside. And in response to that, what hormones is the adrenal cortex gonna produce? Cortisol and aldosterone. Cortisol and aldosterone, two steroid hormones. Okay, two steroid hormones. When is this whole adrenal axis stimulated? Long-term stress response. Days to weeks to months is when this is activated. So then you get cortisol and aldosterone circulating around in the blood. What is the job of cortisol during this long-term stress response?
Blood sugar raising.
It's going to raise blood sugar. And how's it going to do that?
Protein thing.
It's got to break down proteins and it's got to break down fats to do so. Okay. Cortisol is also an immunosuppressant as well. What's aldosterone going to do?
Blood pressure raising.
It's going to raise blood pressure, and specifically what it's going to do, we'll get to this when we talk about the kidneys. Aldosterone goes into the blood, it acts on the kidneys, and it tells the kidneys to take sodium that would normally become part of the urine, and it moves it back into the blood. And wherever sodium goes, water follows. So now we have more water going in the blood. You have more water going in the blood, that increases blood volume, and that increases blood pressure. Okay. Good, so that's the long-term stress response. And perhaps I should have started with the short-term stress response. Okay. The adrenal gland is also involved in the short-term stress response, or the fight or flight response for that matter. And what part of the adrenal gland is going to be involved in that, in the short-term stress response? The adrenal medulla. And what is the adrenal medulla going to release that's going to be involved in the short-term stress response?
Epinephrine.
Primarily epinephrine in humans. Okay. And epinephrine is going to circulate in the blood, and what does it do? Causes the heart to beat more forcefully, vasoconstriction, all these different effects that you think of with regards to the sympathetic nervous system. Which digestion too? What's that?
Like it slows. Is that the one where it slows digestion? Like
well, the sympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic response slows the digestive response, but whether epinephrine from the adrenal medulla does that itself, probably not.
It's redirecting blood flow, though, to the more vital organs.
It does redirect blood flow, exactly. Select vasoconstriction and vasodilation. So you will get vasoconstriction to the digestive viscera. And what's going to stimulate the release of epinephrine from the adrenal medulla?
Short-term.
Well, short-term stress, but what specifically is going to act on the adrenal medulla and cause it to release epinephrine? The sympathetic nervous system. And where do those sympathetic neurons that travel to the adrenal gland are going to move through these spinal nerves? And do you guys know what specific spinal nerves what specific spinal nerves those sympathetic neurons are going to travel to get to the adrenal medulla?
The thoracic.
They're in the thoracic region, yeah. And let's see, so we have
C1 to 7.
That's C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. T1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And so somewhere in this region, in the lower thoracic region is where those sympathetic neurons are going to travel to and innervate the adrenal medulla and cause the release of epinephrine.